Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to continue talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy as we have one more number to go through for this trilogy, and that is of course Volume 3. And in this poster you see all the characters that are our main cast. Yes. And so they all appear at various moments in this movie, and I want to talk about them. I want to talk about the story. I'm gonna use pictures of the actors to refer to them in moments. I'm also gonna use the music because, like I've said before about the other two movies, these are absolutely chock full of older music. And as I've also said before, I say older because I'm a millennial. I'm 32 years old, so I refer to them as older music. But as I've also come to enjoy this movie, I've also started to enjoy that music as well. So, I thought you should know that. Okay, and before I start with talking about the story, I have to give you the disclaimer, of course. For instance, English is not my first language, which means that on occasion I might still flub a word. That might happen. And I also occasionally might swear or not. Sometimes it doesn't happen as well. Also, on occasion, I might get ahead of myself or lose my train of thought or go on a tangent, and those are all reasons why I might have an awkward pause. Also, important to know is that the text that I'm about to read from and also improvise a little is on my screen, which means that the screen will get brighter and I will get brighter as well. And so you ought to know that. Okay, let's start with talking about this movie and about the story, especially the story. Yes. Okay, so we start off, and I'm gonna intercut myself already. I'm gonna say for a moment that timeline wise, this movie falls after Endgame because some things are not as similar as before. For instance, in Endgame, we come to know that time travel is possible, and in, I will mention something about that in a moment because it's a little important, especially when it comes to one particular character, Gamora, and I will point that out in a moment. Okay, so we start off on the planet of Nowhere, which is a city planet. And as I've said before about Nowhere, it is based on this enormous giant head of a celestial, which, as I've said, is an original creator of the universe, of the galaxy. And the Guardians are now the the stewards of this place. They have their own headquarters on this celestial head called Nowhere. And I'll start by saying that here is where the first song comes into play. And this is a very well known song. It's called Creep. It is by Radiohead. And it gives us the intro of this movie as we see everyone come into frame, doing stuff all over the place, helping out, and showing who they are. And that includes Rocket, who, as I've said before, and I'll say it again right now, is played by, well, especially voice played by this man right here, Bradley Cooper. With Sean Gunn standing in for. Maybe I get that backwards. I'll recheck for a second. You know what? Never mind. So, Bradley Cooper is the voice of Rocket, and this movie is all about Rocket, by the way, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. And so, Creep by Radiohead plays as we see everyone as they're adjusting to living on nowhere, as they're working with the people that are living there. For instance, we see Drax, played by Dave Bautista, this man right here, as he's helping out with putting a sign up in a language we do not understand, but actually it means Guardians of the Galaxy, because that's their name, of course. And so we get the reveal of Rocket walking around the place, singing along to Creep, by the way, as it's playing for everyone around. And he walks into, I guess, a kind of bar kind of place where Peter Quill is hunched over, where he seems to be drunk from whatever he's drinking. Of course, Peter Quill, played in all 3 installments by this man right here, Chris Pratt. And that leaves us to see what's going on there. And a bit later, I feel like I'm losing. I should be telling something else, by the way. Anyway, so we find the Guardians here at their headquarters dealing with stuff. And the reason why Peter Quill is so bent out of shape is because he misses Gamora, the person that he was getting close to, as they did kind of start to be in an item during the time that they spent together. But now, and here's where that time travel thing I want to talk about for a second comes in. So, Gamora died in Infinity War because Thanos had to throw her off the cliff on Vormir. And so, as Thanos and his ship and his troops did the time traveling themselves to the present, we find a time traveled Gamora back in this timeline now. And she has gone off to another part of the galaxy. And Peter is absolutely gut punched by this, because this is not the same person as before. Because he's convinced that they should be together. Yes. Okay, and we get a cool shot of the group together as they're walking out with Peter in someone's arms. I'm forgetting whose arms. I think it was Drax. Okay. And they put him to bed. They get to sleep. Everyone goes to sleep. And then late at night, we see someone approaching nowhere. A golden guy with a cape. And this is someone that has been hinted at before at the very end of the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie as High Princess Aisha, played by Elizabeth Debicki, who also appears in this movie, by the way. That's this lady right here, Elizabeth Debicki, who plays Aisha. And so she had a promise that we will have an ultimate weapon that will work for us. And she calls him Adam. And we get to see the person playing this Adam and the people of the Sovereign have a name for Adam as well, and that is called Warlock. And if you put those names together, you of course get Adam Warlock, who is a very important character from the comics and is extremely powerful as well, and he's also part of the Infinity Watch from the comics initially. And so we get to see that character for the first time in full form in this movie, and he's played by this guy right here, Will Poulter. And by the way, he does a very good job, I will say, in this movie. And he's been sent to the Guardians to take them out and get revenge on what they did to the Sovereign before. Having Rocket stealing those batteries from in the second movie on their planet. And so Adam comes to nowhere and he starts to fight with every one of them. And we get a bunch of interesting action scenes. We see how people deal with him because he's such a powerful figure who knows how to fight. And fly, by the way, because he has a giant cape that allows him to be more aerial. And so we see all of the members of the group fight. I'll show you the poster again. So you have all these people, both Drax and Nebula, who's now part of the Guardians, by the way, and Peter and Mantis as well, and to some extent Kraglin too, Sean Gunn's character, and then of course Groot and Rocket. And Groot, as you can see, is now bigger and bulkier, and maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I think that maybe Vin Diesel actually portrayed him in the flesh here. And then also another person, well, let's call it what it is, a dog in space. Of course, that is Cosmo right here. Cosmo, the cosmonaut, that was the name, who is voiced by Maria Bakalova, who you might know from the second Borat movie. That's her right here. Okay, and so Adam Warlock fights all of them. They show off their skills to him, and alone they can't face him, they can't defeat him, but together they can. And together they manage to wound him enough that he goes limping back to where he is from, to the Sovereign. But he does that right after he manages to critically wound Rocket. He nearly kills Rocket as he has been sent to nowhere to deal with them, to kill them. And he nearly, again, kills Rocket. And here we start to learn about Rocket's background. Although I'll mention for a moment too that Adam gets pretty wooden himself as Nebula uses the old arm from Bucky Barnes from the Avengers to stab Adam in the back to the front, and with that English accent of Poulter says, "That hurts." By the way, if you want, sound off in the comments if I do an okay British accent or not. But be polite and friendly about it. Okay, so we continue from there, and we learn more about Rocket, as apparently he has a kill switch embedded inside him, as they are trying to nurse him back to his health. But they can't do that because there is a kill switch inside him. And they learn this as they see that through a, what will be the, you know what, they see this through the use of technology. Yeah, that's the easier way to say this. Okay, and they learn actually that that device has been in there, and that this device comes from a place called Orgo Corp, excuse me. And to save Rocket's life, the Guardians gather together. They get on their flight. They get on their plane, which is now, I believe, in a new plane. They have a new spaceship in this movie. Gonna briefly look it up. Which one? Spaceship. The Benatar is the name of the ship. Wait. I'm getting it wrong for a moment. Just to set the record straight, so the first ship that the Guardians used was the Milano, until that was severely damaged by the Sovereign. And in the second movie, Rocket was attempting to repair the Milano, and that ship has been abandoned on the planet of Burhard, and finally they got a new ship which is called the Benatar. Okay. And that is the one that we see in this movie. Okay. And so the group sets off to the Orgo Corp headquarters so that they can find the override code for the switch inside Rocket so they can save his life. And while this is happening, we get flashes back from Rocket's life before the Guardians and Groot too, as he is having flashbacks of the time that he was found and experimented as a baby raccoon. And we get to see a new figure and the main villain of this story and movie, and that is the High Evolutionary, who is the leader of Orgo Corp. And the High Evolutionary is a being that wanted to enhance anthropomorphic life into human animals to create an ideal society. And that ideal society is something that they used from the comics inside this movie, and it's called Counter Earth. And the High Evolutionary in this movie is played by an incredibly talented man, incredibly talented actor named Chukwudi Iwuji. And I think I said this right for once. I sometimes have a hard time saying particularly tough names. And so the High Evolutionary has experimented on Rocket before. He's made Rocket the way that he is today. And we get visuals of the people the fauna that Rocket has befriended in the past before, as he is part of Batch 189. And they're all test subjects, as they are created for the sake of making this perfect society, Counter Earth. And so Rocket gets to meet these beings. And I'm gonna talk about those people for a moment who voice these characters, because they're all small animal-like creatures. Because they, like Rocket, have also been tampered with. And the other three are Lila, Thieves, and Floor. And through the flashbacks that we see of Rocket, we get to see how they became friends. And so one of the first things that we see here is that just after Rocket has been experimented on, he gets thrown into a cage along with these three. Excuse me. And I want to briefly talk about the cast because there are some incredible people playing them. For instance, you have an otter that becomes Rocket's main love interest, and she is an otter, and she is voiced by Linda Cardellini. And if you can see it well, here's a picture of Lila right there. I chose this picture because you see all three of them if you look well. And so Linda Cardellini is also known to Marvel because she has played a Laura Borton in the past before. And Laura Borton is, of course, the wife of Clint, otherwise known as Hawkeye. And then we also have Thieves, which is a walrus, as you can see right here. This guy right here, who is voiced by Asim Chaudhry, who has also been experimented on, and the only way for him to move around is in the wheels that have been attached to him. And then you also have Floor, which is a rabbit that has also been experimented on, but she's got kind of mechanized legs that bring her around. And that's this one in the front right here. And so those are Rocket's friends and his supposed girlfriend, who is also a figure from the comics. Okay. And so we get to see more of them in the background. And we get some more with Rocket and the High Evolutionary, played by Chukwudi Iwuji, who is very impressed with Rocket, as he has what is called original thought and curiosity, which allows him to be very adept and think outside the box, becoming very intelligent in the prospect. And so the High Evolutionary uses those insights from Rocket to improve other batches of those human animals. And we get another scene with those human animals as the High Evolutionary tries to make them more humanoid. But he becomes angry that there is one thing that he cannot fix, and that is the increase in violence in those beings. Because there's a specific material that is inside the process of making them into humanoids that makes the human animals likely to rage out effectively. Which I will argue is a part of human life. And so the High Evolutionary becomes exceedingly angry that he cannot figure out how to solve this problem. But Rocket does. And so he plans to harvest Rocket's brain and incinerate the rest of Batch 89, which are those three friends that Rocket is making: Lila, Thieves, and Floor. And in more scenes later on, we see that Rocket becomes aware. It becomes very aware of this. And so, well, I'll get to that point when in this movie. And so, the Guardians have, well, especially Nebula, has contacted someone close to Orgo Corp that could help them inside of this place. Because it's a very different kind of thing that the Orgo Corp is based in, and it's made of human waste, basically. And I'm not talking about what comes out of our back ends, but like our flesh itself. And so the Guardians go to this thing. They have suits on to go through space, of course. And we get a funny scene with them on top of it, where Drax makes full use of the fact that these suits have open communication lines with each other, and he and Mantis team up to make fun of Peter as he's been dealing with his issues. And Peter urges the others to focus on what's happening. I should also mention for a moment that right before they get on, they meet up with this contact of Nebula, who is nobody else but this 2014 version of Gamora, as you can see in this picture, of course. Gamora. And so she's very different from how she was supposed to be because of all the processing and therapy like time that she had with all the Guardians. And so she's a lot meaner and tougher right now. And that causes her to have fights with Peter, especially because he is very much still very in love with her. And he wants to be with her. And also another person we get to see here is Stakar Orgort, was of course played by this actor, of course, Sylvester Stallone. And here so they have a moment together. The Ravagers, as Gamora is now part of the Ravagers, and they give the Guardians those suits, and so that leads us to the Guardians in the suits on top of this thing where Orgo Corp is based in, and they use a system to get into it. That was my phone. You can ignore that. And we are introduced to the Orgo sentries as they are about to catch up to the Guardians as they just got in, as they infiltrated the Orgo Corp. And one of the head people of the Orgo Sentry is Master Karja. And Master Karja is played in this movie by someone I've watched a lot of on television, who I enjoy almost in any role that he does. And there's, of course, this guy, Nathan Fillion, who is also very well known for doing other sci-fi work like Serenity and Firefly. And you also know him from The Rookie, and in my case, Castle, on television. And so he and his group are contacted by the person controlling the cameras and all of that inside this fleshy like thing that they're all in. And there's a funny moment with the sentries and the guardians as they get rid of their spacesuits, and those spacesuits accidentally go into a bin that goes into space itself. And we get a funny scene where Master Carja says something along the lines of, "You got a problem with that, bro?" And Mantis responds with, "No, we don't have a problem with you, bro." And it's almost line for line, but I got it wrong a little. Anyway, so yeah, that's a funny scene, and that leads them to see that, oh shit, our spacesuits are out in space. That was not meant to be the case. And so not every one of the Guardians is inside this big fleshy thing. They have Groot on standby in the ship, the Benatar, as he should help out in a way. And he does, but I'll tell you about that in a moment. And so they go inside this thing. They start looking around for the file that they start looking for the file of Rocket, which can have more information that they need to save his life. And so that they can override the code that is on the kill switch inside Rocket. And here they also discover one of the High Evolutionary's advisors, a guy named Teal, who does have a small but significant role. And he's played by this gentleman right here, right next to Sylvester Stallone, and that is Nico Santos. He plays Recorder Teal, who is a big guy, a big bald guy, yes. And so they get the code, and they have to blast themselves out of there because the people on this big fleshy thing learn about what is happening, especially because old Gamora is just not a good person to handle with, and we get a couple of scenes with one of the other controllers in this big flashy thing, and that is a person named Ura, who is also played by a very talented actress that you might know from other things, and that is this woman right here, Daniela Melchior, who you might know from, in my case, The Fast and the Furious, the more recent movies, especially the last one, where she played the sister of Helena Neves from Brazil. And she's been in a couple of other things as well. For instance, another James Gunn movie, the latest Suicide Squad movie. And just briefly to be giving you this, personally I find that to be the most fucked up best movie ever. The best, most fucked up movie ever. Okay. And so they continue to have fights with the guards until Peter finally gets control over the controls handling the guards, and they get out of there. Especially as Rocket crashes the Benatar inside this big fleshy thing, and in his native tongue, the I Am Groot speak, he said, "Did that look cool?" Which becomes a thing in this movie. And Nebula responds, "Yeah, that did look cool." And So they get the info for the file. And they come to know who the file has when they have the information from Orgro Corp as they get back on the ship, and they recognize the code that has been used on Rocket with the code that they just got from their place. Yes. And this is how they learn that Teal has taken that information away, as he has uploaded it to himself, because he also has like a cybernetic kind of thing in his head that keeps store of that kind of information. Alright. And so that leads the Guardians to go to Counter Earth, where the High Evolutionary has his headquarters. And in the meantime, they're being followed by Adam Warlock, again played by Will Poulter. That's him right here. And also Aisha, too. Because they kind of have like a mother-son relationship. She treats him like a kid, but he's way more grown up, actually. Although he does still not have any idea on what actually it is he is doing, because he got out of an egg, a chrysalis almost. Kind of in the same vein as the Sovereign, of course. As they believe that everyone has a role that they must perform, and they should only do those things. Okay, a little bit more of their backstory. And so, Aisha and Adam track the Guardians. But first they meet up with the High Evolutionary, who has a word with them. And he threatens to obliterate them, as it is his right to do that as their creator. And in a back-to-back scene with the Guardians, Gamora also explains that he's the creator of other species as well, and that for many societies inside the galaxy, he is seen as a god who has created a lot of life. And so the High Evolutionary is pretty angry with Aisha and Adam for screwing up because they failed to retrieve Rocket. And so the Guardians find themselves on Counter Earth, and they see a world similar to our own Earth, with all the anthropomorphic animals, the more humanoid versions of the animals of the animal kingdom, and see them in all forms of it. And for instance, they land in a neighborhood close to a lot of people, and they need more information first to get to the headquarters. And so the group goes to... Well, as they arrive, there's that little scene where to test the Guardians, there's a little girl from one of the families living in the neighborhood, as she slowly but silently lets a basketball bounce to the group, which Drax picks up and tosses it back. But he does it with such force and accuracy that it hits the little girl in the head, unfortunately, which makes the group start to rebel against the Guardians, and they throw all kinds of stuff at them. And we have Peter freak out for a moment, and he tells Groot to go kaiju, which of course is a reference to Godzilla, of course. And Groot, in his larger form, becomes even larger and angrier and tries to scare them away. And in doing so, one of the inhabitants here, which is a humanoid version of a bat, a woman humanoid bat, falls to the ground, hurts her knee, and Peter Quill helps her up, offers her a a handkerchief or a yeah, let's just say handkerchief, so she can dab the blood coming out of her knee. And this is also played in contrast with the fact that that was the very first thing that Lila did for Rocket when he was put in the cage next to hers. So this is a clear sign of taking care of someone to those anthropomorphic humanoid animals that are living on counter Earth, as they've been put there by the evolutionary. And so the Guardians are allowed to go into the house of the humanoid bat family, and here they try to gather their information, and they get a drink from the bat father, a bat with a T. I'm not talking about a baseball bat, by the way. I literally mean like a humanoid version of a bat. And I think I'm also thinking of the word for it. The Dutch. I'm thinking of also the Dutch word for bat, which is vleermuis. And so, little aside. Okay, so they get their info in a couple of funny scenes with Drax not knowing the difference between a chair and a couch as he's trying to lay down on it. And Peter draws down the guy that they have found out that took that information away from Ogre Corp Teal. And the Bat Woman tells them to go to a kind of pyramid kind of figure far away where one of those guys are there. Because while Teal looks very unique on his own, there are more people with his kind of role at that place. And so they get the group to the divide as, and I'm reading a little off of this. So Peter, Groot, and Nebula go to the headquarters, which is called Arete Laboratories, while Drax and Mantis stay with Gamora and Rocket to protect Rocket against both the sovereign peoples, especially Aisha and Anna Warlock, while Peter and Groot and Nebula go to the High Evolutionary. And Peter and Groot are allowed to go inside. And in a moment before they enter, Peter gives his weapons up to Groot because he knows he will be frisked for having them. And Groot is able to store them away inside himself. And I'll say in a moment what happens with those quad blasters of Peter as he uses them in all iterations of the Guardians movies. And so, but Nebula has to stay outside because she has that special arm, of course, which is the vibranium arm that Bucky used to have, as she can change a lot with it. And the guards at the laboratories say that you could use it for anything, including a weapon, so you need to stay outside. And so Peter and Groot go inside the complex. And meanwhile, we get Mantis and Drax outside the Benatar as they're discussing and looking around, and Drax gets bored and wants to do something, and so he, not accidentally but purposely, knocks someone off a vehicle, a motorcycle kind of thing, with anti-grav capabilities, so not with wheels. And Drax tricks Mantis to go to the Benatar with this thing, but actually he decides to go with her to the complex that they are going. And I think the reason why he's doing this is because, well, he's just plain all bored and he wants to do something that is purposeful. Yeah. And while they're away, and a warlock arrives on Counter Earth and is going on to the Benatar to get Rocket back for the High Evolutionary. And we get a scene with him and another person too, and that is Wart Pig, which is one of the many guards that the High Evolutionary has protecting the complex normally, but sent out to retrieve Rocket. Or, as High Evolutionary knows him by his initial name, 89P13. And Warpig is in fact a Hellspawn, which is kind of like a humanoid animal, but then heavily weaponized. Kind of like Nebula, but then an animal version. Yes. Okay. And of course, because of the name, in the form of a pig, of course. And in that moment, by the way, Adam also shows off what he can do with, as he's confronted by Warpig, as he's also trying to get Rocket back. And a little fight breaks out between the two of them, and Adam just, I would normally say decapitates him, but he literally just pulls his head, the head of Warpig, off, resulting in it to die, of course. And that leads us back to the ship, where the High Evolutionary agrees to meet with Quill and Groot. As Quill, he has this amazing line that he says, and I'm gonna look it up. He has this amazing line that I think is also very relevant to our own lives today. Give me a second, I'm looking it up as fast as I can here. Oh, by the way, I need to mention here for a moment that just before the group splits up to both protect the Benatar and go to the complex with the headquarters of the High Evolutionary, we get our very first F word in the MCU as Peter tries for the first time to drive a car, and he gets in easily because as a human we know normally how to drive. I know I don't for other reasons myself, but Peter gets in, he wants to drive, and so Nebula is coming with him normally, and so she tries to get in, and he explains to her how to do it, and here's where he finally says the F word for the first time, as he's explaining how for her to get into the car, and he says, well, push that button in and get in the fucking car. And he says it a bit differently, but that is what it gets to, and we get our first F-bomb in the MCU. Yes, I wanted to briefly say that. I get the quotes from this movie. And there's a lot of them that are really good, but there's this specific line that Peter says And also quite a few lines in this movie have become like a meme in themselves. For instance, there's also something Peter says as they're going to the complex, and that is, the trap isn't a trap if you know the trap is trying to trap you. It's a face-off, which we see happen in a moment, as I will tell you about that. Here's the line that Peter says to the High Evolutionary. I don't need another speech by some impotent whack job whose mother didn't love him, rationalizing why he needs to conquer the universe. Which I find to be very relevant to our real life too, given the supposed big guy in the world right now. And that's all I say about that for now. Okay. Let's continue here with the story. Which, of course, that line was important for. Yeah. Okay. And so the evolutionary. There's a couple of other things that Peter says that make it clear that Counter Earth is an imperfect place, as you have these humanoids, these humanoids attacking each other over drugs, for instance. And so High Evolutionary agrees that, yeah, it is imperfect, but as the leader of this planet, it is then also my right to take them out. And he starts doing that. He starts bombarding the entire planet, killing everyone on this place. And that also, by accident, includes the the leader of the sovereign Aisha, who dies in the process. And as that is happening, this very headquarters appears to move, apparently, because it's just a giant spaceship actually. And that happens just as Drax and Mantis get to Nebula, who has been held up by the gates to the complex. And they very nearly almost do not get on the spaceship, but they do. And they believe that Quill and Groot are still on board, and for some part they still aren't. But we get an amazing action scene here with Groot and with Peter as they show off their skills. And here's where I said those quad blasters of Peter come back in, as those have materialized into a few more inside Groot. And so Groot is now a gun-toting, walking, talking tree. And kind of in the same fashion as the previous two installments of the Guardians, shows off that he's one hell of a menace in a fight. And so is Peter too, as he shows off his skills. And we get incredible action scenes with the two of them here in the main office. And here, the High Evolutionary and his top person back away as Peter deploys a grenade, which makes everything go boom, of course. And so we have that amazing fight. And Peter bears down on Teal, who is back there with that information he still needs. And he grabs him by the vest and shoves him out of the spaceship as it is going up, of course, while the planet of Counter Earth is blowing up, of course. And so Peter jumps after Teal, getting him, and Groot quickly follows him right as the High Evolutionary comes out of his hiding place. And he has a line here too. And I'll tell you the line. I'm looking for it right here. I'm quickly looking for it. Oh God. Just a second, folks. Now, it appears that I do not find that line, but it comes to the point where it sort of says, like, amazing escape plan to fall head fast into a planet that is exploding. That's what it comes down to, what he is saying. But it's not verbatim. It's not exactly what he says, but that is what it comes down to, what he is saying. So, sorry for that awkward pause for a moment. Okay, so let's continue with the story here. And so, Groot and Peter get Teal off the spaceship, and they manage to kill him by crashing him into the planet. And they retrieve the override code from this corpse. And by the way, in the process of the planet being bombarded, Adam Warlock got slung out of the spaceship, the Benatar, and Gamora is trying her best to get the Benatar out of there, but she has no idea how to use this plane because she has no experience with it. And luckily, she manages to stop the ship right on time before she crashes it into Groot and Peter Quill. And so Peter rushes back into the ship. They have a moment. Well, first they get out of the place. They get out of the planet and get the Benatar into a safe place. And here they quickly use that code that they got. I'm getting ahead of myself, or losing my train of thought anyway. Here, Peter uses the code that he got from Teal, and he inserts it into the device through the technology that they have on the ship, because it's not like a physical thing. It needs to be getting through on amazingly a computer code kind of way. But as they're doing this, Rocket flatlines. His heart stops beating, and he has a near-death experience. And here we get another scene with him and his friends as he meets them in supposedly a higher kind of plane. And there's a line here that Lila says that is amazing to hear. And she says, there are the hands that made us, and then there are the hands that guide the hands. Which is a line indicating that you're not done just yet. You matter. You belong with your friends, with your family. This found family that you have. And yes, you've lost a lot in the past before. You've lost us before. Because in the background you can see Thieves and Floor as they greet Rocket. And he's, of course, thinking and saying, like, is it time for me to go? But it's not. And so the goat goes through, and Quill manages to disable the kill switch and restart Rocket's heart. Because he's distraught by what's happening, of course, that Rocket is about to go to the land of. Go to the beyond. And we get an amazing scene with Chris Pratt just yelling his lungs out, giving a performance, giving one hell of a performance. Kind of like, you should come up with like a new award for this, like the best screaming moment, because he's just outright almost sobbing to the point that Rocket is about to lose his life because of what happened. But luckily, he pulls those tubes and starts to actually perform CPR on Rocket. And finally, in the supposed afterlife, where Rocket finds himself, and Lila says to him, well, I'll read from this. Quotes between the two of them again. So Lila says, "My beloved raccoon, the story has been yours all along. You just didn't know it." And as Rocket says, "I'm not a raccoon," he is pulled back to reality. And he wakes up. And the elation is huge for Quill and for Groot. And they hug Rocket, who is very glad to be alive and be among his friends, to be among his found family. And he quickly notices and comes back to his real self that, well, there's only the two of them and Gamora standing by them closely. And he sees that the communicator with the other crew, with the others, is still on. And we begin another heartfelt moment as Nebula reacts to Rocket being alive, as she's on the ship, as she finally got on the ship with Drax and Mantis, and they got through one of the non-entries aboard the spaceship of the High Evolutionary, and Nebula has this like moment, like deep breathing, like, oh my god, my friend is alive, is the moment that she has as she is trying to take care of what seems to be other humanoids. In this case, little girls and boys. And so they encounter this new batch of test subjects, which are genetically modified human children. But unfortunately, they are captured as well, as High Evolutionary takes them away from this group. And they're knocked out to be placed somewhere. And that leads Peter in communication. That gets Peter in communication with the High Evolutionary. And he also has this interesting line: "You'd like to joust, won't you?" And I briefly have to say, because I'm looking up a lot about the script and the lines and the quotes from this movie, it's just an amazing script for a movie about humanoid animals serving along with other humans in this found family kind of situation, which makes it a very heartfelt and beautiful movie, despite it very much being about a family and community. Yes, and so they the so Peter and in a recovered rocket and Gamora contact the people on Nowhere, specifically Kraglin, of course, played in this movie by James Gunn's brother, Sean Gunn, as he is getting Nowhere ready for the assaults that the High Evolutionary sends their way. And that assault force is the rest of what the Warp Pig is. The Hellspawn forces. And apparently, we see in those moments that Nowhere actually can be moved itself. Well, part of it really does. And they shoot off a thing, an explosive to the spaceship that got out of the Counter Earth. And they start to help everyone on Nowhere to protect them. And so a battle starts to take place between the Guardians and people on Nowhere against the High Evolutionary and his forces. And as it is happening, and hell is breaking loose on the spaceship that got out of Counter Earth, which is called Arete. The top brass that the High Evolutionary has around him, they see all of this going badly for them, and they decide in this moment to take care of themselves in a mutiny against High Evolutionary, which results in him taking care of them violently. And he unleashes his power, and this is... It's not exactly sure what it is that he does, except that he uses that power to just obliterate them, as they have completely eradicated when we see him back without the amazing force that he just used. Says. And so Drax, Nebula, and Mantis have been put into a center kind of thing between the cages of all these humanoid children that have been genetically modified. And we get another wholesome scene here, as well, wholesome and funny, because Nebula and Mantis really don't know how to deal with children, while Drax did have a daughter, and he quickly makes sure that these kids know what they're dealing with, and he uses their language in his favor, because apparently he knows their language. And that is also part of this funny scene as well. And so, in communication back and forth with the Guardians on their ship and Nowhere, they tell the kids to stay away from the starboard, which is the outside part of the spaceship, because they could be killed if they stay close to that part. I don't know if it was the starboard, but that was what I thought it was. Anyway, so as they're dealing with this, the High Evolutionary tries to take them out by throwing in obelisks, which is a creature I've talked about before on the second movie, which is a very thing that fights the Guardians at the very beginning of it. The huge tentacled monster with impenetrable skin. You know, we'll show it again. It's not that clear, but maybe it's clear enough right here. This thing is an obelisk. And so 3 of those things are put with them as the evolutionary hopes that the obelisks will eat the 3 of them. But Mantis decides that maybe it isn't us, maybe these things aren't. I'm rephrasing for a moment. Mantis thinks a bit through and actually thinks that we shouldn't be afraid of these things, but maybe they are afraid of us. And so she uses her skills in this moment to befriend those 3 obelisks, which allows them to escape along with every one of those genetically modified children. And so they cause a breakout inside the system. And that gets the children and Nebula and Mantis and Drax to leave with the children outside onto nowhere, as the big giant skull thing has bashed into the big spaceship that the High Evolutionary is on. And they're really like this, they're almost like kissing, I would say, but it's not kissing, of course. And so this entire group goes on to nowhere along with the obelisks, with the 3 guardians that are on the ship there. And the people on nowhere start to help them out. And that includes someone I haven't talked about enough, because we get also scenes with this character quite a lot. And I'm referring to Cosmo, the space dog, who has telekinesis. And throughout the movie, we get scenes with her and Kraglin, because Cosmo is a girl dog. And she has a bit of a feud with Kraglin, because he's been training to use that fin that he got from Yondu in the second movie. After he passes away. After Yondu passes away, he passes and passes. He gifts his fin collection to Kraglin so he can use it. And Kraglin has been trying to train with the fin all throughout this movie, and we get this feud between him and Kraglin, between Kraglin and Cosmo. And in effect, he says that Cosmo is a bad dog, which is very traumatic to Cosmo, and she complains about this throughout this movie. But Cosmo proves in this last moment that she is actually a very strong dog, and shows off that the telekinesis that she can use is powerful enough to keep the spaceship that is up against nowhere, that she can hold it up with her telekinesis. Yeah. And so as all these kids and all these other animals are getting out, Cosmo is holding up this spaceship. It's called the Arete, if I didn't already say that. And as they're going out and just remembering that let's not just say that I'm forgetting about the music. Let me just briefly go over all the music that happens in all these things. So I did mention at the very beginning that Creep starts to play. We have the song called Crazy on You by Heart that is used during the introduction of Adam Warlock. You have the song of Since You've Been Gone by Rainbow, when the Guardians go to Orgoscope, which has that line of "We're floating in space." You have the song "In the Meantime" by Space Hog, which is when they are infiltrating Orgoscope. You have the song called "Reasons" by Earth, Wind and Fire, which is when Groot saves the other Guardians during the battle in the Orgoscope. There's also the song "Do You Realize" by the Flaming Lips, which is a more recent song. Which was used for the trailer that dropped during the San Diego Comic-Con in 2022. There's a song called "We Care a Lot" by Faith No More when the Guardians arrive on Counter Earth. There's a song called Koinu no Carnival from Minute Waltz by a Hammock, and also a very more recent song that plays during the car when Peter, Nebula, and Groot drive to the base of operations of the High Evolutionary on Counter Earth. There's a song called "I'm Always Chasing Rainbows" by Alice Cooper, which is playing on the Bowie while the Guardians are away. There's a song called "San Francisco" by the Mowglis, also more recent song, when Gamora is piloting the ship. And by the way, I'm realizing here that I'm mixing two spaceships through each other for the Guardians to use, because there's two. You got the Benatar and you also have the Bowie, of course named after the incredible artist. There's also the song "Porgal" by X, which is playing on Nowhere when Cosmo complains for another time while she is playing poker along with Kraglin, the broker, Howard the Duck, in a bar-like area, a casino-like area, where she once again complains that Kraglin called her a bad dog. You also have the song "This Is the Day" by the DD, when the Guardians are traveling to save Nebula, Drax, and Mantis. And then we have the last couple of songs, which I will mention right now. So, just as Rocket discovers that while there are many humanoids on this ship, there are also other animals on this ship that have been guarded, that have been put in little cages as they are afraid to leave because they think they will get killed by the High Evolutionary. And so here Rocket is confronted by the High Evolutionary, and we get what is called a hallway scene in Marvel, which they use to tons of effects, especially in this moment right here. And as they're having this moment in the hallway scene with all of the action, where all the characters show off how they fight, with Quill using his quad blasters, with Drax using his immense strength, with Nebula being very bendy because of her cybernetics. You have Rocket using his similar kind of style to Quill, and also Groot with his large limbs, of course, in a Mr. Fantastic kind of way also. And Mantis also performs some interesting fighting as well, as they all square off against the Hellspawn force from the High Evolutionary. And then finally they get to the High Evolutionary. And just before this all happens, before that amazing action scene, Rocket finds those imprisoned animals on the ship and that includes baby raccoons. And he finally realizes, as he is getting those baby raccoons out, that he in fact is a raccoon, a bigger one. And he finally adopts that name, Rocket Raccoon. And so all of those little creatures are getting out, those animals, along with the humanoids that they got off the ship. Which leads into that action scene I just talked about. And finally, that I was talking about the music as well. So the Guardians all meet up again, and here we get one very amazing song that plays so well in this moment as they're about to go into that big action sequence, and that is No Sleep Till Brooklyn by the Beastie Boys, as they're battling the High Evolutionary and his creations in that epic hallway battle. Which finally leads them to confront the High Evolutionary, while Rocket first fights with him, showing off what he can, and he finally adopts that name. And I will give you the line. Give me a moment, I'm looking it up here. Here it is. So Drax says to Rocket, "You should kill him." But Rocket pulls his blaster away, and Drax asks why. And Rocket says, "Because I'm a freaking guardian of the galaxy." But there's another part he says. I'm trying to look for this as fast as I can, folks. Here it is. So there's this fight scene between the two of them, between the High Evolutionary and Rocket Raccoon. And the High Evolutionary yells to him, You thought you could escape me! No! And he starts to attack Rocket. And he continues, You think you have some worth in and out of yourself without me? No! You're an abomination! Nothing more than a step on my path, you freakish little monster! How do you think you're more 89P13? And Rocket frees himself in this moment, as he's been tied to... He's hauled up to the roof of wherever they are. And he uses the anti-grav boots that he used at the very beginning of the movie, which was a foreshadowing for this moment. And he drops to the floor and he takes out his weapon and he says, "The name's Rocket Raccoon." And that is a dope-ass moment for a character like Rocket to fully come full circle and embrace who he really is, as he has found himself and his found family, as he is glad to be alive as well. And so ultimately, the others come in, and we have all of them showing off a little of what they can, as they did before with that battle scene in the hallway against High Evolutionary. And they see something that Rocket had done before when he broke out at the first point, when he first broke out after the High Evolutionary killed his friends. After he killed, I'm gonna show that picture again, the three of them, Thieves, Floor, and Lila, because Rocket did attack him then too, And so we get to see that actually the High Evolutionary has been holding up his face because Rocket had scratched it loose as it becomes back loose because of all the fighting that they're doing at this moment. But finally, Rocket decides that no, I'm not gonna kill you, and he has that line because I'm a freaking Guardian of the Galaxy. Which leads them, which leads the group to leave the High Evolutionary, and they go and continue to help the animals that Rocket has spotted to come to nowhere. And in the process, Quill gets a little behind, and he damn nearly dies as he's trying to reach nowhere, while it is going away from this spaceship that the High Evolutionary has. But he does not die because Adam Warlock, who got himself involved with this fight as well, who finally has broken free from the Sovereign and from Ayesha as well, as he gets to the group, and the group accepts him as one of their own. Because Groot had earlier had helped him out when the spaceship was being destroyed. And by the way, the scene as Adam Warlock is saving Peter is kind of similar to that amazing portrayal of. There's a famous painting with God creating Adam for the first time. And it's kind of similar in that moment as they touch fingers. And so that gets us to the last couple of scenes from this movie as they all decide to go their other ways. And Peter has had some scenes before in this movie where he finally comes to the realization that I've been chasing women my whole life as I've been trying to find out who I really am. And now finally at the end of this movie, he has come to terms with the fact that I need to return to Earth and be with the only real family that he has left, and that's his grandpa. And so he tells that to the group, and in this moment he also names Rocket the new captain of the Guardians. And so Peter goes back to Earth where he meets up with his grandfather Jason on Earth. And here for the first time we learn that his grandfather is named Jason, which likely has a foreshadowing for a possible Peter Quill movie in the future. Because at the very end of this movie, we also get a little placard that says Peter Quill will be back. But we don't know that yet about the Guardians. But here, everyone kind of separates from each other, as Mantis has also realized that she needs to go on a journey of self-discovery, and she goes with the Obelisks to find out about more about herself, which is maybe interesting if they do another Guardians movie where we see where she is going. And you also have Gamora as she rejoins the Ravagers, and she also has this little line to Peter where she says, "I bet we were fun," and he responds with, "Like you wouldn't believe." And Drax decides to stay on Nowhere as he becomes the new kind of leader of Nowhere, along with Nebula and Kraglin, which leads Rocket to become the captain of whatever ship that they still have left, along with Rocket. So Rocket becomes the new leader of the Guardians, and he has Groot under his command, and also Kraglin as well, but also Cosmo, which of course is the dog, and also Adam decides to stay with the Guardians and become one of its members, which is also what happens in the comics initially. And also one of the kids that they rescue is called Phyla. And also the pet that Adam got throughout this movie called Blurp. And this movie ends with them as they take on a new mission. And so that is the story of the Guardians of the Galaxy in the MCU so far. I want to thank you for listening to me, for listening and watching this episode. And you can like this video if you like. You can also subscribe to the channel. And I would love it if you share this with friends and family and people at work or people just online here on YouTube. And please spread the word about the FWX podcast. Okay, thank you for all of this. I've been Frederik for the FWX podcast. See you in the next video. Goodbye for now.